The UFC heavyweight division is being held up by an undisputed champion that does not want to fight the interim champion. It's a mess, and there's a lot more to this division that's going to cause problems in the near future for the UFC that goes a little bit deeper than just Jon Jones ducking Tom Aspinall. So stick around to hear me explain the UFC heavyweight division's iceberg in 2024. I'm Wyatt, and this is Fight Society. All right, guys, so before we get into the video, make sure to like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. It really helps me out a lot. First off, the very tip of the UFC heavyweight division iceberg, we have Jon Jones is our heavyweight champion. Everybody knows this. Everyone that follows the sport knows who Jon Jones is, knows his transgressions in the past, knows his great successes, all of that. Now, this is the tip of the iceberg. Jon Jones, undisputed world heavyweight champion for the UFC. But there are some things below that that show the real problems that the UFC has at heavyweight that are really kind of just being muddied and covered up by a very media dominating top three rankings. Jon Jones, Stipe, Tom Aspinall, and then like whoever's in that fourth slot fighting for the interim belt with Tom, essentially. Below that, first off, we have Tom Aspinall, UFC interim heavyweight champion. Jon won't fight him. He beat Sergey Pavlovich to become interim champ at UFC 295, and then most recently at UFC 304, defended the interim heavyweight strap against Curtis Blades. Got Curtis Blades out of there in a minute, faster than Sergey Pavlovich did. And he beat Sergey Pavlovich in a minute or so as well. Tom Aspinall is the real heavyweight champion. Dana's denying this, but we know the truth. Just below that surface as well is somebody who has also gotten a lot of headlines recently, the UFC light heavyweight champion, Alex Pereira, who has floated a desire to move up to heavyweight to challenge for a third belt. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, but I think he said he only would fight for the undisputed strap. I don't think he said he'd fight for an interim belt at heavyweight. I think that Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira is very possible because the UFC just booked Magomed Ankalaev and Alexander Rakic for UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi in October. So either Alex has a different opponent or they're holding Alex out until 2025. We move on from there. The next, just below the surface level, just below Jon Jones being champion, right there with the current interim champion waiting for a fight with Jon Jones, Alex Pereira floating a move to heavyweight. You also have the annoying, nobody wants to see matchup that is going to be most likely UFC 309 in Madison Square Garden this November for the undisputed World Heavyweight Championship. Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. You have Jon Jones looking to get an easy peasy win over Stipe, who is over 40 years old, hasn't fought in 3.5 years, 4 years maybe, got knocked out viciously by Francis in his last fight. And we'll get to Francis in a second. But so this is the next layer, just below the surface level. Jon Jones is heavyweight champ, best of all time. Jon Jones is the best. You have Tom Aspinall, the interim heavyweight champion, UFC light heavyweight champion, Alex Pereira, and you also have the nobody fucking wants this matchup of Stipe Miocic and Jon Jones. Now, down from there, there is literally two meaningful fights booked at heavyweight because Jones and Stipe is technically not announced with a date. So there's two meaningful fights at heavyweight, and one of them is really not that meaningful. The first one is coming up on the next pay-per-view on August 17th in Australia, Tuivasa versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. So it is like top 10 heavyweights. Obviously, this doesn't have any title implications, but this is more showing a bigger point that at one point, there's literally two meaningful matchups in the division right now. Tuivasa is just a fan favorite, so they give him matchups that are like respectable. He'll be on 3 straight losses. They'll give him another top 10 guy. Get knocked out, they give him a top 5 guy, stuff like that. So the only other meaningful matchup booked at heavyweight right now was just announced for UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi. Ciryl Gane versus Alexander Volkov rematch. Surprisingly enough, Ciryl Gane's not on the UFC Paris card. He is on the Abu Dhabi card, UFC 308, and Benoit Saint-Denis is going to be the Frenchman headlining UFC Paris against Renato Moicano in September. Now we move on from there. So just so you guys see where we're going here, the very tip top is Dana White glazing Jon Jones, heavyweight champion. best of all time. But below that, the deeper we go on this iceberg, the more cultured you are. And I mean, you watch this channel, so why wouldn't you be cultured, you know? So you have Jon Jones at the tip of the iceberg, just being glazed by Dana White, heavyweight champ, best of all time. Just below that, you have Jon Jones ducking Tom Aspinall. So we have Tom Aspinall. We also have Alex Pereira possibly moving up to heavyweight, and the matchup that nobody wants, rumored for UFC 309, Stipe versus Jon Jones. Below that, we have the only two meaningful matchups not being that meaningful. I could see Gane and Volkov fighting Tom Aspinall if, like, the winner of Gane and Volkov could fight Tom Aspinall for the undisputed belt if Jones and Stipe both retire after their fight. So below that, we have, I put the rankings here, but this is really just the overall talent level. Like, the talent pool at heavyweight is just god awful. Anything below, like, Tuivasa is not a great fighter, and he's ranked very high. He's like number 8 or number 9. So if you look at it, the division's not very deep. And without these super media grabbing, attention grabbing headlines like Pereira versus Aspinall, Pereira versus Jones, or the ongoing memes about Dana glazing Jon Jones and talking about the Stipe fight and all that, if there wasn't for all of that distraction at the top, we would unfortunately have a very dead division at heavyweight in the UFC, which is crazy to think about because it's typically been the marquee division with Brock Lesnar and Randy Couture, Frank Mir. Like, these were all big names back in the day that the UFC pushed. So it's just interesting to see that without a little bit of distraction and smoke and mirrors up at the top, there really is a very, very stale, dead division in the UFC right now at heavyweight. It's not like a women's division. It's not men's flyweight. It's heavyweight, interestingly enough. And at the very bottom, there's a couple things to consider about the UFC heavyweight division right now. Is first off, you have the champ that never lost his belt, that walked away from the promotion to get a boxing payday. You have Francis Ngannou. Francis Le Predator. He has moved on. He went and got 2 big boxing paydays, and where he lost by decision to Tyson Fury and then got knocked out by Anthony Joshua. Vicious, brutal knockout. But big paydays, he got exactly what he wanted. He went to the PFL, which is a promotion that treats him the way he wants to be treated, where they treat him as like a part owner and they care about what he has to say, where the UFC obviously is just like, yo, Francis, get fucked, go fight. So it really is crazy that the guy that was the guy, the UFC heavyweight champion that never lost the belt, is just in this. It's not an obscure promotion. He's not like he's fighting in Brave FC or something, but it is to the casual mainstream audience that like comes around for Conor fights that might have known who Francis was because of all of his knockouts when he was with the UFC. To that fan base, he is just in obscurity. And what's crazy about that is that even though the PFL is nowhere near as hyped or has the same attention as the UFC, I'm just being honest, I'm just being objective as a creator here, but you have the recent booking of Francis Ngannou versus Renan Ferreira at Battle of Giants Brace for Impact, where they're going to fight for the PFL heavyweight title. Now, the reason I have that in here is because what the mainstream fans would view as some obscure promotion that they don't care about, Jon Jones is the UFC champ. He's the GOAT, man. Don't you know it? We actually, right now, for an undisputed title fight, Ngannou versus Ferreira, probably going to be a more high-level fight than Stipe versus Jon Jones. Might be a hot take, but I'm just saying it could be. Like, this obscure promotion that, I'm talking about in the eyes of the mainstream fans, this obscure promotion that most people don't care about, that somehow has an ESPN deal, that got the former UFC heavyweight champion as used, damaged goods now after getting KO'd by Anthony Joshua, is actually putting on a very high-level heavyweight fight. Now, if you think about Renan Ferreira and Francis Ngannou are both top 5 or to 7 in the UFC rankings right now. If they were in the UFC rankings right now. Both of them are top 5 to 7 heavyweights. And Renan Ferreira would give a lot of guys a hard time with his size. So here is our UFC heavyweight iceberg, mid-2024. We have Jon Jones up at the top as our undisputed champion. And just below that, we have the matchup between him and Stipe that nobody really wants. We have the Alex Pereira possible heavyweight move. We also have Tom Aspinall, the current interim champion, coming off of a win over Curtis Blades at UFC 304. Below that, we have the fact that there is literally only 2 meaningful matchups, and they're both outside of title contention, except for Gane and Volkov. Maybe one of those guys gets a title shot off of a win. Maybe they fight Tom. But Tuivasa versus Rozenstruik kind of means nothing. It's just a main card filler with a ranked fight on UFC 305, which is an incredibly weak card. And Gane versus Volkov is a crazy fight to have, like, not even as a feature match on UFC 308. That card's going to be crazy. So down from there, we have I put the athlete rankings, but it's really just the absolute weak talent pool in the UFC heavyweight division, where all of this madness at the top really is just distracting from the fact that the division's very weak and stale right now. And it could be a dead division if there wasn't all of this talk at the top about Pereira, Aspinall, Stipe, and Jones. And then at the bottom, we have the fact that the real heavyweight champ, the champ is here. No, he's not. He's in the PFL. Francis Ngannou is in the PFL now, not in the promotion, never lost the belt. And he is fighting against Renan Ferreira, which could be a more high-level fight than Stipe versus Jones. So undisputed title fight for undisputed title fight. I'm just saying, PFL may be up. Maybe up one, you know what I'm saying? So anyways, that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think down below. Is Francis versus Renan Ferreira a more high-level fight at this point in all of their careers than Stipe versus Jon Jones? Let me know what you think about the UFC heavyweight division right now. Like, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Hey guys, thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. It really helps me out a lot. If you're interested in supporting the channel further, then become a channel member today for access to members-only live streams, vlogs, and some other members' perks. So click the link in the description down below or the join button on our channel homepage to become a member today. If you're interested in some non-MMA content from me, go check out my personal channel, Wyatt's World, and go check out my weekly comedy podcast, What's Up Bro, with Wyatt and Bo. Both of those are linked in the description down below. Go watch this suggested video, and we'll see you next time.